Welcome to another episode of AstroBiographies with Jennie and Laurie. And we've been talking a lot, and we've decided we're going to kind of tighten up the way we do these things a little bit more. And we're going to focus on three basic things. First, we're going to start out looking at the chart from the perspective of the midheaven. And what we can see from there is, how do we know these people who are not personal friends of ours? How do we know them? And that is what the midheaven really tells us. So we're going to start from that perspective. We're going to talk about it from there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about just the core basics, the sun, moon, and rising, and talk about how, the archetypes of those and how we can see the person from that perspective. And then third, we're going to look at the chart from the perspective of the ascendant. What is this person like if they're our friend rather than just someone we know from their public face, which was the midheaven. So those three things are how we're going to look at it. And I just want to say, one of the ways I think of the difference between the midheaven and the ascendant is, if you're walking down the street with a friend of yours and you see someone across the street and you say to your friend, oh, that's so-and-so, they are blah, blah, blah. That's the midheaven. That's you'll say they're a doctor or they're famous for this or known for that. But then if you meet them face to face and introduce them, this is my friend, then you're looking at the ascendant. That's kind of how I think of the difference between the midheaven and the ascendant. Are you meeting the reputation of the person, or are you meeting the personality of the person? So who are we talking about today, Jennie? And do you have anything to add to that before you tell us who we're talking about?
Yeah. Oh, no, I really like the way you said that. We haven't talked about, like, you haven't mentioned that in a while. I'm like, oh yeah. And I think that's great how you put it. It's so clear and understandable. So no, that was it. And today we are going to talk about Billie Jean King, partially because I just ended up watching the movie recently. So we said, let's go ahead and do Billie Jean King. She is the tennis player from the 70s who played Bobby Riggs. She's known for a lot of other things too, because she's an amazing tennis player. But the thing that she's the most known for is how she beat this very sexist male tennis player who challenged her to a match, just for exactly the reason to kind of put her in her place as a woman. So of course it's awesome that she won. And that's who we're going to talk about today. She's also an incredibly skilled tennis player. And the movie is called Battle of the Sexes. It's from 2017, and we don't know how accurate the personal details are in the movie, but it certainly captures the match itself between the two and the kind of two personalities in the public eye. So it's kind of like what you're saying about the midheaven. It's like the movie is sort of like a snapshot of the midheaven, but we don't know how accurate the so-called snapshot of the ascendant would be, because we don't know every single detail about Billie Jean King's life. But anyway, that's who we looked at, and that's one of the movies. There may be other resources, but that was just the main movie, and you can get it on Netflix.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably stuff on YouTube about her. I read a bunch of stuff on Wikipedia. She's an amazingly accomplished. What an incredible woman. One of the things that I loved, that I don't know if it was in the movie, I don't think it was, but I read about her that I thought was really interesting. When she was a little kid, I mean, her whole family was very athletically inclined. And she started out playing softball, and she loved softball. When she was like 11 years old, her parents decided they wanted her to do a more feminine sport. And that's when she started tennis. I thought that was rather interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. In light of how other things unfolded for her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. She's fascinating, but.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's bust into the chart. So
let's look at the chart.
Get that up and try out our new methodology.
Yes, let's do that. Okay. So we're going to start out looking at the midheaven, and we can't look at the midheaven without noticing immediately that the midheaven is not, visually at the very top of the chart. It's right here in the 11th house, because we're using whole sign houses and because her ascendant is at such a late degree of Capricorn. That means, that leaves the midheaven here in the 11th house. With the midheaven in the 11th house, what's your immediate thought just from that, Jenny?
Well, what you think of when you see the midheaven in a different house other than the 10th of career, you want to look at what those other topics of the house are. And in this case, it's community and groups is the 11th house, or humanitarian causes, or in some schools of thought, sort of like hopes and wishes and aspirations. That's more what we're seeing is, so part of her vocational profile is going to be very much in front of groups and having some sort of impact on the community. And from there you can start weaving in a bit of, okay, so we got Scorpio in the midheaven. What does that add to our picture? And that is sort of like this affecting change, dramatic change, trying to make things really have a metamorphosis, right? In front of groups.
It's really interesting to think about that midheaven in Scorpio in the 11th house, the empowerment of the community. And, she was such a feminist symbol at that time for all women. I mean, winning that match with Bobby Riggs was not, it wasn't a singular thing, like she won it. It was like all women. I mean, that's really what it felt like at the time, that all women had won this battle,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. And, the other thing in thinking about that 11th house is it's community. But, I always think of the polarity between the 5th and the 11th as the 5th where you give love, the 11th where you receive love, and that empowerment of that's Pluto ruled midheaven. She certainly received a lot of love from the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that part of the 11th house, because from that you can really understand how the person, I don't know, was able to like fit into the community, like let themselves be supported. And so showing that it really is a two-way street, that you're not just this individual on your own, flapping in the wind. It's like you really are serving a purpose for the community.
Yeah.
I think that, so I was thinking like the next step. So you're looking at the midheaven. I think the most obvious thing is simply to observe that, well, geez, the sun is also in Scorpio in that 11th house. So that just suggests some way that she's illuminating the 11th house, or is being illuminated and stepping into that purpose in a way that she was supposed to do. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's, and yeah. Is that what you would sort of go with next?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, having the midheaven right there and thinking of it from, where we started with, how do we know her? We know her by the empowerment that she brought to a wider community. And
Great.
then if we look at the planet that rules Scorpio, and in this, I'd look at Mars. Would you look at Mars or Pluto or both?
Oh, yeah, absolutely looking at both, because especially, I mean, I always like to look at both anyway with Scorpio. I kind of learned the tradition of Pluto first, of ruling that midheaven, and then I've really come around to how Mars plays a crucial role. But I haven't totally dropped the Pluto part, because Pluto is such a suggestion around empowerment. And and it just takes 2 seconds to look, right? You just glance over and you see, oh, geez, Pluto's conjunct the North Node. So that brings in this idea of like, that is part of her role, part of her, again, perhaps her purpose is around empowerment and empowering a generation, because Pluto in Leo is a generational designation. When you throw in Mars, when you look at it from the Mars perspective, you're seeing a Mars that's retrograde. So it's going to be outside of the norm of masculinity in our society and how that's looked at. It's a Mars that it's not extremely happy. It's going to do something about it. And, by golly, you see that she's going to do something about it. And she works extremely hard. It trains extremely hard. So I think you see all those things in that. Yeah.
And the sextile between them, that opportunity to empower her physical body and how it's used there in the sixth house, the day-to-day routines. Yeah, that work and that is one thing that movie really showed, is how committed she was to her to the work that she did. It's not like she just, came into the world as this great tennis player. This woman, yeah, Pluto really pushed her. That's lovely.
So
Okay.
that's nice to look at how the two work together too. That's a good thought for when you're breaking that down. If you do have one of the signs in the midheaven that has two rulers, is to look at the relationship between the two to get more information.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, just to add another little tiny layer here, Pluto is squaring the midheaven. So that opportunity to empower her body has to be used, and it's not easy, has to be used for the empowerment of that career path.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's lovely.
I was just thinking too, like Pluto conjunct the node is an interesting statement, because in more modern astrology, we tend to look at North Node as sort of like the purpose, like the tip of the arrow of the direction of your entire life, and having it be empowered on the generational level. In the more ancient Hellenistic astrology, the North Node represents basically a malefic, meaning something that's going to be in the way and kind of a blockage that has to be worked through. So either way, you're looking at something that has to be strived for. There's work and effort that goes into it, and it's for the generation. It's not just for her personally. So
yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Jenny. I'm glad you said that part. That's really important. Yeah, it's a very generational effort.
yeah.
Okay, so I think that covers looking at it from that perspective of the midheaven. So now let's talk about, let me clear all of that.
Okay.
And let's think about just the archetypes, the sun, the moon, the rising. So we've got the sun right there at the very end of Scorpio, right at the end of Scorpio, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, okay, if we just think of the sun as the core energy that she has at her disposal, we can think about, what would the archetypes of Scorpio be that you would think of here?
Well, the one that comes off the top of my head is the catalyst.
Yeah, me
I
too.
mean, that catalytic vibe. Yeah. Because there's other ones, isn't there too? I mean, Scorpio can be like the detective or the psychologist or the shaman, and those kinds of things. But I think just using the catalyst one makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and then 29th degrees is we always talk about that as the unstable degree, because it's getting ready to change. So it's not really, there's a sort of a restless energy that comes through at 29 degrees of any sign. But so thinking about that too, I always feel like it shows as just a little extra impetus to do something about it. That's what I've noticed. But
Yeah, a little resistance, but a requirement. That's what
yeah,
I think of with that restlessness. It's like, oh, I really wish I didn't have to do this, but I have to.
yeah,
Okay,
you
so we
got it.
can think of her as, right there at that core. She is a catalyst for the community. And then we look to her moon. Her moon is in Libra, up there in the 10th house. What would be the archetype you would think of for Libra?
Well, in her case, I think of Libra as like it's the fair player. It's fairness and the balance of the scales, and this sort of some real need for things to be fair. And again, we always talk about how Libra is kind of this like overlooked sign, a little bit like everyone's like, oh, Libra, and again, here you see, well, Libra is damn well going to argue when it doesn't see something that's right. It's not fair and it's not right, and that adds a lot of, that's what brings about, I think, the more cardinal aspect of Libra. It's a cardinal air sign. It's this really need to initiate something, and I'm gonna do something. So I think that's
And
kind
yeah,
of what I
and
thought of.
one of the big things that she was really passionate and furious about was the inequality around the pay between male oh man, some of that stuff in that movie was fascinating. How, you know, these guys are like, you know, nobody wants to watch women and women aren't any good. Yeah, it was just horrible. But yeah, that is at 0 degrees Libra also, which is the Aries point. It's something that she is really known for, is that need to balance and create fairness. The work to create a more diplomatic playing field, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we can, okay, so what was the archetype? Did you have a specific archetype that you used?
I never answered your question.
Nothing,
I mean, an archetype is the mediator, the artist, the peacemaker, the diplomat. And I guess in some ways you could say that she was playing the diplomat in that role, where she's like, well, I'll go out and kick his ass because,
and
you know.
And that's also, I mean, that's an interesting thing with Libra, is people tend to think of, the pretty part of it, the artist part, but boy, you know, Libra is cardinal, and this is a 0 degrees cardinal, and they will fight if something's not fair. Or they'll cause a fight so that they can have something to balance afterwards anyway. Libra is a fascinating sign, and it's a lot stronger than we give it credit for sometimes. So, so now we've got the catalyst with the moon. The way I word this, we would say she's the catalyst with the heart of the diplomat. Got to put a sharper edge on that diplomat, but we'll hold it there. And then her rising sign is Capricorn. So let's think about what we would use for an archetype there. Oh, that's an easy one, right?
I know, there's some pretty good ones there for Capricorn. I mean, there's the strategist, there's, you know, the pragmatist, there's I just think of somebody with a lot of the integrity to make things happen.
And the authority.
The authority. Which I think all of those things come into play, and the fact that so this is kind of what you're seeing maybe on the personal level, because we're starting to work into the ascendant, but just of this person who, she knows what's going on, you know, she's got the very hard work to back it up. She's done the hard work, so she's knows what she's talking about with tennis, and she damn well knows that she's really good at it. And just because she's female, she's not going to give into this idea that somehow she's less than. Like, absolutely not, because she's done the work. So
I love that. Using the word strategist, I think, is really good for her. So we can think of her just in that simple little sentence: the catalyst with the heart of the diplomat, wearing the mask of the strategist. I like that. So we can kind of put that out there as our number 2 piece in our new system of looking at these. And the third one is, what if she's your friend? What if you know her on a personal level? What are you going to see?
Well, we talked a little bit about, because she's got this Capricorn ascendant, and so where right away I'm thinking about the ruler of the ascendant, because that gives you a ton of information. The ruler of the ascendant is sort of the it's a special to her planet that has extra emphasis, and in this case it's Saturn, it's retrograde, and it's Gemini. So the retrograde designation indicates somewhat of a discontent, usually based in Till world, is based on some kind of malcontent with the father that has the origin in the father, you know, that relationship. You know, I don't know if that's exactly true in her case, because I haven't studied her relationship with her father. But it's certainly what you see. So maybe somebody with a chip on their shoulder, and she's going to say something about it because it's in Gemini. So a little bit of like, I'm not content with the establishment, and I'm gonna say something about it.
And Capricorn rising always brings me to thinking about, you know, the person. There's such a seriousness. There's such a I often find, you know, in consultations with people with Capricorn, they didn't have much of a childhood. There's something about them right from the get-go that there's a very adult demeanor about how they approach the world. with that Saturn, yeah, retrograde, they're probably, we can speculate all over the place, but we'll try not to do that.
Yeah.
But Saturn conjuncting Mars, how she uses that seriousness is through physicality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else with that Saturn?
Well,
Go ahead.
hmm.
What do you?
Oh, I was just going to say Saturn conjuncting Mars is a little bit of one way to think about it is driving a car and having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So there's a little bit of like Mars wants to go forwards and it wants to go forwards now. And Saturn's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you considered all the implications? Have you thought this through? Are you thinking about all the things that you really need? Is this necessary? So it's a checkpoint. Though I must say it's fascinating thinking about them both being retrograde, because that kind of adds in, I don't know, there's just deeper layers of having to really kind of wrestle with those. And really, I think, to me, the retrograde speaks of like a boil over. Like the stuff is going down, and all of a sudden it's like, it like sort of boils over into some kind of necessary action.
Well, I know, there's a few questions I would ask her if she were here and we were talking to her. Because what it makes me think of as I'm looking at this, okay, Saturn rules the ascendant, Mars rules the fourth house. The whole till idea of that retrograde Saturn being around the father makes me think of that whole issue of, well, I wanted to play softball, but my father made me play something more feminine. Well, God damn it, I'm gonna use that strength of Mars in a not necessarily feminine fashion.
Yeah. That's cool.
It just makes me wonder how much of a conflict she encountered making that switch from what she initially was doing to what her father wanted her to do. I just wonder about that. That's important.
Well, you're making me think about just the fact that the ruler of the midheaven and the ruler of the ascendant are in a conjunction together, and it kind of suggests all these things. And what that says to me is a little bit of like her public life pitting against her personal life.
Yes.
And certainly in the movie and the dramatization and Battle of the Sexes, it certainly suggests that her personal life is constantly kind of put under, while her professional life takes front and center, and that everything gets shoved aside for that. So that's kind of an interesting, like Mars kind of nudging or trying to nudge aside the curmudgeonly old father, in a sense.
Yeah.
Just being like, no, I want to be in the spotlight, and that's where I will be.
Well, that's so interesting. The other thing that I don't know, and I haven't really thought about this, but I just am paying attention here, is that Saturn sextiles Jupiter. Let me see. I don't know how relevant that is to how we know her. Well, I guess, if we started out this conversation, like, what if she's our friend? What if she's our friend? We know her as this serious person who probably, sets aside her friendships a lot because she's working so hard. And yet she does have this connection with an ability to be more open and accepting of people who are different than she is, that eighth house idea. Does that bring anything up for you, Jenny?
Well, what's interesting, no, I like where you're going in those thoughts, but what popped in my mind is that, well, Jupiter squares the sun and Saturn squares the moon. So, the ability to bring those two things into the arena. So Jupiter into the sun, like, so kind of lifting and elevating and making that more fun and more open, the things that you're saying, but then her emotional needs being squared by Saturn, because it's squaring the moon, and just thinking that there's a real seriousness underneath that must be addressed, so that there might be a joviality and an ability to be a bit more fun outwardly, especially with Jupiter and Leo, but that underneath there's the seriousness is what ends up taking the precedence.
It's a fascinating chart.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
I feel like we've kind of covered the three points we
Mhm.
intended to. Is there anything else that you want to point to or talk about with this one?
Yeah, I just want to add the idea. So we've done all that, but something that would be helpful is look at the other aspects to the sun and moon, especially to the outer planets. You have an opposition of the sun to Uranus. So and then you have the moon Neptune conjunction. And as I'm speaking about those two things together, I'm just encouraging you when you look at charts, for folks who are listening, to just notice when those outer planets are contacting, especially the sun and the moon, because these are often the change makers
Yeah.
in our society, the people that are meeting the challenges of society that end up being in the spotlight and taking on certain things inadvertently or because of who they are, or depends on what their path is.
Yeah.
um, that's what I wanted to add in there. What
Yeah,
are your thoughts?
I'm glad you added that in there. And I just, yeah, that Saturn squaring that moon and Neptune, it's like, yeah, this is so much the difficulty in 1973, which was when the big Bobby Riggs match was. According to the movie, and I don't know if the timing was right, but according to the movie, that same period of time was when she first got involved intimately with a woman, and the difficulties in the early 70s around that issue was very different than it is now. And
Mhm.
that really speaks, I think this really speaks to this
Mhm.
feeling the need to hide what her heart really wanted in terms of relationship because of the work she had to do in the world.
Yeah, yeah, and those
Something.
things being, yeah, that's a good point. Is it Moon Neptune really is this elusive placement, and usually people with Moon Neptune, um, there's a need to kind of there's a need to escape, or a need to somehow contend with like or there's a need to escape, or maybe there's a challenge around feeling invisible, and actually both those things often feeling in play at the same time. So while she's like visible in her career,
Mm.
she was maybe struggling with this interior thing, and that very quickly did become visible. I don't know exactly when, but it did definitely become visible later.
Maybe it
But
was
those are some of the stresses. Yeah.
maybe it was visible to her father when he tried to put her in a more feminine sport.
Most likely. His gaydar was going off.
That may have been a factor involved there. Uh,
Yeah, and
really.
that might be the meaning of the Saturn retrograde for her,
Yeah.
this in that particular way then. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
those
the
are things to
idea of
look for.
Mars retrograde there. It's really fascinating. Okay, well, Jenny, this has been super fun looking at this, and I liked
Mhm,
doing it this way. So thanks for being here. And if
mhm.
anyone wants to find Jenny, she is at hiddenpathastrology.com,
You
and
got
I'm
it.
at astrolore.org. And contact us for consultations or teaching or whatever else you want to contact us for.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate it, and thanks everybody
Thanks.
for tuning in.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.